And now, as Tom Hafner and his daughter, Grace Wilms, come forward to light our chalice, I invite you to rise in either body or spirit and join together in our affirmation of faith. The words are printed on the back of your bulletin. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. For these high purposes do we unite in worship.
We light this chalice, letting go of what has been, open and hopeful for what may come, renewed, restored, ready to live life fully anew. May we move forward with intention.
So friends, I start out with a question. Who's in the room with you this morning? Who's in the room with you this morning? I heard this question every morning for a week-long workshop I once attended at Star Island, which is one of the UU camps off the coast of New Hampshire. The minister leading that workshop invited us to think about people from our past who were still with us, influencing current attitudes and feelings and our actions. So I ask you the same question. Who's in the room with you this morning, influencing your ways of being in the world? What memories, what stories do you bring as you come into sacred space? We all carry stories with us. You know, I often wonder, in any given congregation, how many stories are present out there during this single hour when we're together in worship? How many stories we carry with us? Those memories of people and events who came before us matter. The stories we carry influence how we construct the many narratives that make up our lives today. All these narratives then contribute to how we understand our identity. Personal identity contributes to knowing our center, which is the theme for worship this month, in worship and in Soul Matters, knowing our center, finding our center. The stories we carry are shaped by many factors, including concrete memories of actual events, as well as general impressions and feelings about the past, perhaps impressions that someone told us about, but we don't exactly remember ourselves. How many of you have stories in you that you didn't experience yourself, but you think and believe they are real because someone else told you, right? We acquire stories from others as well. Also, our stories change over time as we acquire new perspective on our lives. All these stories, these narratives, might become the subject matter of people like historians, like I do some work, or anthropologists, or writers, or psychologists. Sometimes stories persist so much over time and across cultures, and they're so universal that they become myths. That is, stories which convey eternal truths about life. So in the Time for All Ages this morning, I talked about two women who are often in the room with me. My mother and a 19th century Universalist woman minister named Mary Billings. And some of you know that I'm finishing up a book about another early woman minister named Lydia Jenkins. Lydia and Mary and other colleagues who came before me function as my muses, my inspiration. When I meet bumps in ministry, I think about the many challenges early women ministers encountered. You know, their challenges weren't about having internet for help in writing sermons, nor having problems with Zoom connections on a Sunday morning for multi-platform worship. They had much different challenges. Early women ministers faced hurdles just because of their gender and what was considered appropriate activities for women. So through the ages, there's been constant challenges and assumptions about what ministry is and what identity a minister carries, identities related to race and sexual orientation and ableism. So through the centuries, ministers can inspire one another and bring a long line, a long heritage into our current identities as ministers. The past matters. History matters. History is those events that came before us. And history is how we interpret those events. So this is my premise when I teach history. History is the facts and the interpretation of the facts. History connects us with those who came before and those who will come after. History brings the past into the room with us, right now, here, today. For me, history is spiritual practice. Earlier in my time with you, I talked about spiritual practice, for which we have many different explanations. I explain spiritual practice as connections. Connections within myself, connections to other human beings, connections with this mystery some of us call God, some of us call the divine. When I'm spiritually in tune, I'm not alone. I'm connected with other life. When I'm doing history, that is when I'm reading history or writing history, I know I'm not alone. There's always someone in the room with me. We heard in that reading from Gerda Lerner how she understands that history is connections, the past to the present to the future. The past is always in us, friends. It's on our hard drives. We can't get away from the past we carry with us. I try to engage some history every day, some reading, some writing, volunteering for the Unitarian Universalist Association on committees. History grounds my day as I connect with Unitarians and Universalists who came before me and came before all of us. I encourage everyone to be historically aware, be as aware as we can in the context of how busy modern life is. Try to check tidbits of history as often as you can. I hope that the UU history course, which some of you participated in about 2 months ago, extended your awareness of the identity of Unitarian Universalism. I hope that history has given you a better sense of identity. Where do we come from? When others ask to explain where Unitarian Universalism comes from, we can proudly talk about centuries of connections that have come before us in two denominations, Unitarianism and Universalism. In the American colonies, Unitarianism had spread from Europe to the American colonies, and our settlers held Unitarian beliefs for decades before the Unitarian denomination was founded in 1825, after inspiration from a stirring sermon by William Ellery Channing in Baltimore, which led to the founding of the Unitarian Association in 1825. We have a long heritage on the Unitarian side. We also have a long heritage on the Universalist side. Universalism is an American religion. It was especially popular in rural areas and among self-educated people. One early Universalist preacher was named John Murray, who started the first Universalist church in Gloucester, Massachusetts in 1770. Universalism was a very appealing religion. The notion that all of us are born into goodness and all of us will be saved was what made Universalism different from the Calvinism that had dominated American culture. Calvinism saying some of us are damned to go to hell, and we don't know who of us it is. So Universalism, a great comfort in the 19th century when it spread quickly throughout the country. So that's a little bit of where do we come from as denominations. Where do you come from? It's also important that you know the history of this congregation. Know your local history. If you're relatively new here, do you have some idea of the early years of this congregation? Or if you're an old-timer here, how has your perspective on this congregation's history changed over the years? Let's review a bit of UUFD's history. Newcomers, I hope some of this offers some context for your understanding the history timeline workshop that we're going to do after the service. And for folks who have been here longer, I hope a few things I say right now will stimulate your personal memories. This congregation's history is truly a heroic story of faith and commitment. So many of these dates I'm going to mention over the next few seconds are posted across the top of the history timeline that you see on the patio wall of this sanctuary. During the workshop, you'll have an opportunity to read these details closer up and in more detail. I want to remind everyone that also during your 50th anniversary of this congregation, you created another history wall, which is posted in the business office area of the building across the way. So I invite everybody to go take a look also at that other history wall that you created back in 2017. So a few facts about this congregation. It was chartered in September 1967 with help from a UU minister named Orloff Miller, who came over from Colorado Springs. It's coincidental, I plan to mention Orloff Miller next week as well in my sermon on the civil rights movement. Many of you here today participated in the 50th anniversary of this congregation in 2017. I'm sure you're conjuring up memories as I'm talking. The origin of this congregation typified UU lay-led fellowship congregations of the mid-20th century. Those earliest gatherings were in members' homes, private homes, followed by meetings in the 1980s in a building called the Unitarian House, and then in Durango's Smiley building through the 90s. And the need for more space led to this building, establishing this building in 2007. Many of you, I know, were integral to acquiring and setting up this building. The president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, William Sinkford, visited this building twice, including when you dedicated the building. The first minister was Reverend Katie Kandarian Morris, who began here in the year 2014. So just a bit of review of where this congregation comes from. And beyond Unitarian Universalism here in Durango, Unitarians and Universalists have been here in Colorado since the late 19th century. I don't have exact dates, but toward the end of the 19th century, Unitarians organized in Denver and in Colorado Springs, and Universalists were in Longmont, Colorado by 1880. And today, in the state of Colorado, there are 20 UU congregations, most of them from the 20th century. What are we? From thinking about where you came from, what is Unitarian Universalism today? I hear some describe it as two separate intertwining threads, Unitarianism and Universalism. I actually think of Unitarian Universalism a little differently. Unitarian Universalism, to me, is like the waters in the rivers in Pittsburgh, where I lived for many years. In Pittsburgh, in downtown Pittsburgh, there's the Allegheny and the Monongahela River, and they come together to form the Ohio. Think of them as a yellow river and a blue river. And when they come together, they form a new green river, the Ohio. And then that green river continues to flow on down through the mid-portion of the country and picking up the reds and the browns and the yellows and all the other colors of other religions, such as just as Unitarian Universalism has acquired other perspectives and other theologies. As we picked up earth-centered spirituality, as we've added humanism and Judaism and Taoism and others to our theological diet. How do you describe what Unitarian Universalism is today? How do you explain what church you go to? A while back, we had elevator speeches. They were popular. You know, describing this religion to a stranger who gets on the elevator with you, and in the course of 6 floors, you explain what Unitarian Universalism is. What do you say? You might say this is a religion that embraces theological diversity, held together by the glue of respect and the glue of love. UU diversity is not only, though, about theology. We support diversity in gender, sexual orientation, class, race, ableism, and so much more. You might also say this is a religion based on a reasoned approach to searching for life's truth and meaning. Finally, you might say that this religion is covenantal, not creedal. Individuals are connected by how they act together, not what they believe together. Today, this congregation is part of the Pacific Western region of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Of the 20 congregations in Colorado today, over half are minister-led. And the congregations in Golden, in Fort Collins, and in Denver are among the largest. Memberships vary between 300 and 750 in those larger congregations. The closest neighbors to this congregation are fellowships in Pagosa Springs and in Dolores, Colorado. What is this congregation today? Who are you today? What is the core identity of this congregation? Have you thought about that question? What is the core identity? Every congregation has a core identity, qualities and characteristics that explain its culture. Perhaps a commitment to social justice, or to families, or to being academically oriented. Core identity, it's expressed through mission statements that we live out through living through the congregation's covenants. So covenants and mission statements help clarify our core identities. We'll talk more specifically about identity when we work on an all-church covenant later in this transitioning time. Where are we going? I can't say with any assurance where Unitarian Universalism is going in the future, but I have some hopes for this religion. I hope it continues to encourage spiritual growth, and I hope we all continue to learn more history, so to better understand our identity. I hope we continue to be known in our communities as beacons of welcome and diversity, welcoming all no matter how you self-identify or whom you love. I hope we continue to stand on the side of love and justice, to truly commit to justice-making in and among ourselves and in the wider world. I also hope we continue to explore the negative influences of privilege. I believe the biggest challenge of this denomination is classism, which perhaps unconsciously sets up barriers that keep some people out. I also hope membership in Unitarian Universalism grows, not so that we have more people to do the work and pay the bills, but because the liberal values of this faith are just good for this world, our world which is in such turmoil, such divisiveness right now. I hope going forward over the next 6 months, Unitarian Universalism will elect its first Black woman president. We have an election coming up next spring in Pittsburgh, and we are looking forward to breaking yet another boundary by electing a Black woman as president of the association. Where is this congregation going? This is one of the key questions during an interim period. What lies ahead, and what role will you play in the future of this congregation? Perhaps you will personally want to keep doing what you've been doing here in this congregation. Or perhaps you want to explore some new areas of volunteering. Perhaps doing something you thought you never had any talent for, like singing in the choir, or working with the children, or getting involved in social justice activities. The future is by definition uncertain, but I hope your future is filled with limitless possibilities. Where have you come from? What are you now? Where are you going? The theme of our opening hymn. So my friends then, around 11:15 we'll begin the History Timeline workshop. I hope everybody can stay for it. The timeline will remain posted for about 6 weeks, so you'll have other opportunities to both post and read on the timeline. But I encourage you to stay for the workshop because we're going to be engaging in various conversations about the importance of our memories of the past. And I want to give a particular shout out to the transition team, in particular Sherrod Beal, Tom Miller, and Becky Malecki for preparing this timeline display and the timeline workshop. So in conclusion, my friends, the more we know about where we've been, the beauties and the warts, the better we can claim the present and influence the future. I call each of you to identify a few Unitarians and Universalists from the past. Bring someone into this room with you when you come here. Find events that make you proud of this denomination. May we each own our past and our future, the anxieties, the anticipations, the hopes, the potential. May we have the knowledge of where we've come from, discernment of who we are now, and hope for the future, for where we are going. May all this be so.